I'm so excited to introduce Macy Stock. She is she'll be student teaching in the fall and at an elementary school in Columbus. What's the name of the?
Lost Creek Elementary.
Lost Creek. And I've had the pleasure of working with Macy for the last 3 years through some advising, and she's been in, I know, at least one class, maybe more than that. I think maybe 2 classes of mine. And so I've really enjoyed working with her. She's going to do great things in the classroom. And it's just it's so neat to think ahead about how many lives she'll positively impact through her teaching. So one of the newer trends in public education is social emotional learning, and Macy's going to focus on that today. And it was a lot of fun working with you on your honors project, and I wish you all the best in the future. So here's Macy.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We've got a nice casual bunch today. I want to thank you all for coming to my presentation this morning. And I do want to thank Dr. Legler for your guidance these past 2 semesters and beyond that. But it means a lot that you've been helping with the research, the paper, and everything. So thank you so much. But before we begin, I would like you all to close your eyes. Bear with me, I'm an elementary ed teacher. Close your eyes and think of the most impactful teacher you have ever had. Who was that teacher who helped to shape who you are today? I'll give you a moment to really think of who that is. All right, now open your eyes. So, with that teacher in mind, I want you to raise your hand if any of these things I say describe that teacher. So raise your hand if your teacher focused on developing a meaningful relationship with you and other students in your class. All right, put your hands down. Did your teacher help you to persevere when times got tough and help you to set goals? All right, put your hands down. And finally, did your teacher help you to understand others better and ultimately begin to understand yourself? All right, put your hands down. So these qualities that I mentioned, such as self-management, social awareness, self-awareness, those types of skills all fall into a term called social-emotional learning. Whether you and your teacher may have known it back then, he or she was helping to instill these qualities within you. Which brings me to my topic today. It is what our children need the most in public education, social-emotional learning. As a senior majoring in elementary education, I wanted to investigate something that I could truly bring with me as a beginning teacher. So for my honors project, I chose to focus on social-emotional learning. Social-emotional learning helps all students to develop soft skills that they can use throughout their lives, and it is something that is growing ever more popular in the field of education. Before starting my research for this project, I did understand the basics of social-emotional learning through my coursework here at Wayne, but I wanted to expand on that and see what I could do as a teacher in my classroom. So today, we are going to be discussing exactly what social-emotional learning is, its brief and impactful history. I will be discussing some of its benefits along with a couple of challenges. And then I will be discussing some ways that you can incorporate it into your classroom. I will discuss some resources and curriculum for both teachers and schools, and I will end with my own personal takeaways from this project. So without further ado, what even is social-emotional learning? So social-emotional learning is a relatively new topic in the field of education and has varying definitions based on where you are to look. However, it is essentially aiming to develop students' social and emotional competence. So this means that along with learning standards and academic content, students are also focusing on their social skills with their peers and also emotional skills, such as behavior management. Also, a definition by the Learning Policy Institute states that social-emotional learning is the idea of instructing the whole child. So that means not only caring about their academics, but also their long-term development. This includes creating healthy relationships, treating others with dignity and respect, and also developing the cognitive capacity to think logically. The anticipated result of this is to help develop students' social and emotional skills, help them to become good people, and overall contributing and educated citizens outside of the classroom. This may seem like a brand new, huge topic to try and unpack and get into, and may seem hectic to add to a teacher's already hectic daily schedule, But fortunately, there are organizations that work to provide curriculum and support to help with this. And one that I really want to touch on is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, also known as CASEL, I like to go by. So CASEL is an organization that has been a driving force when it comes to social emotional learning, and it provides both research and resources for teachers, schools, districts, and entire communities. Now, CASEL has a framework known as the CASEL Wheel, which I'll show you in a second, that breaks down social emotional skills into 5 core categories. I'll show you that right here. Here is the CASEL Wheel, and I will be referring to this throughout the presentation, but this is CASEL's framework. So if you will notice in the orange, green, and yellow, those are the 5 core competencies that we talk about when we discuss teaching social emotional skills. And I will give you a brief overview of each of them really quick. So the first one on the left in orange is self-awareness. And if a student has self-awareness, then they are able to recognize and understand their emotions and their thoughts. And they're typically able to go one step further and also understand how those emotions and thoughts can influence behavior. And that is something that is so big that we need to be teaching our students as early as we can. Also, students with self-awareness tend to understand their possible strengths and weaknesses, and that's a good thing because they're also more open to asking for help and telling you what they need. So self-awareness is such an important skill that we should be teaching our students. The other orange one, so the orange is more self-oriented, but the other orange one is self-management. So this is the ability to manage these emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. This category includes skills such as persevering. Maybe if things at school get hard or things at home are getting kind of hard, a student is able to persevere and push through. Another skill in this category is not only setting, but also accomplishing goals. And students are able to take those necessary steps. And the final skill that is associated in this category is staying motivated, more so intrinsically. They don't always need prizes to do things. It just feels good to accomplish things. So that is the self-management aspect of social emotional learning. Next, I want to take you to the green, which is more the social aspect. So the first green one is social awareness, and this is the ability to understand their peers no matter how different they are. We live in such a diverse world, and it is so important for our students to understand that we may not all look the same, think the same, act the same, but really when it comes down to it, we may seem different, but we are all the same. And so the sooner students are able to really understand this, the better it will be for them. Students with social awareness tend to have a better time empathizing with others and an easier time seeing different perspectives and understanding how we can think different things, and it's okay. The next social skill is relationship skills. So this is the ability for students to create and maintain meaningful and healthy relationships with not only their peers, but also their elders. Some skills that fall into this category is good communication skills, and students knowing it is important to tell others what they need. Along with that is active listening. Not only do we need to talk to people, we need to listen to them more than ever. And cooperation, working in a group, any teamwork settings. This is so important to be developing these skills. And then finally, I have the responsible decision-making aspect in yellow. And that one's kind of on its own, but essentially it is the ability for a student to make reasonable decisions that benefits not only oneself, but also others around them. So they're able to think through maybe some ideas. They also have reasonable judgment, and they are a little bit, have an easier time creating solutions for problems on their own, and so that really fosters the idea of independence in children, and we really want to do that as well. If you'll notice the blue layers on the outside, so these are just different ways and areas where social emotional learning can be taught and incorporated. So we have classrooms, schools, families and caregivers, and communities, and the more layers that are involved in immersing children in these skills, the more impactful it is and the more our students will be able to take away from this. So we want to make sure we're communicating as a classroom with our school, maybe having a school-wide program, and also making sure that we communicate with the families and caregivers and communities to make sure everyone is on the same page. That is the CASEL wheel. This framework can be easily implemented into a classroom, and it just makes sure that all students are getting the social and emotional supports that they may need, because in all reality, a lot of students are not learning these skills at home, so it is our job as teachers to meet them where they're at and teach them what they need to know still. Before we get going into the rest of all the benefits and everything, I do want to take you back into the history of social emotional learning. So it did begin to take form in 1968 when Dr. James Comer from Yale University started to investigate the theory of the whole child. So once again, that's caring about their academics and also their long-term development and well-being. So what he did is he implemented an approach. Castle was not a thing yet. This is the first of the whole saga. But he had focused on like relationship skills, being aware of others, things like that. He incorporated these skills into 2 different schools, and it did take some time, but by the 1980s, both of these schools had a dramatic decline in disruptive behaviors and an increase in academic performance. So not only were challenging behaviors at a low, the academic achievement was at an all-time high. So there's really no question as to why this boosted social emotional learning's popularity back then, and much more research began to take place. Fast forward to 1994, after all kinds of research was being conducted, this is when CASEL was finally formed by the researchers and educators. That was that organization that I discussed. They actually deemed social emotional learning as the missing piece in education and discussed how crucial it was for schools to be teaching these skills to students. Also at this time, states began looking into policies so that they could include these skills into their schools. And moving into now, social emotional learning is so prominent across the United States, especially CASEL's framework. It is the most influential. Actually, 2/3 of states, including Nebraska, uses their standards and their strategies from CASEL's framework. So it is having such a big impact, and it is so useful. It's also used around the globe right now, and being used in Israel, Portugal, South Africa, and it's in development in many more countries. So it is a huge thing, and it's so popular, and it all makes sense though, because students are being positively impacted by all of these benefits. Which brings me into our next little area, is the benefits. So these are just 3 kind of broad benefits, but there are so many little ones that come into play, and we just kind of cover them very vaguely. But I do want to discuss academic achievement. So students who are immersed in social emotional learning typically tend to have overall higher test scores, especially in reading and math. And in research conducted in recent years, students participating in effective social emotional learning programs actually had an 11 percentage point increase in their overall test scores. That is a massive jump when we're talking about test scores, 11%, but it's likely due to that the procedures in the classroom. The class that did not have the percentage was the control group. So they really just tested the social emotional skills for that experiment. So it is because of social emotional skills as to why they benefited in that test. And the reasoning is you just kind of have to think about it. It's kind of psychological for students. When students have the ability to be aware of themselves and able to self-regulate their emotions and their behaviors, they're just better able to learn and focus. They're just more ready to go. And also, when students have good relationships with the teacher and the classmates and good relationship skills, they are more likely to feel heard and understood, and this can also result in them being physically and emotionally ready to learn new content. Which is kind of similar to my next benefit, is improved student behavior. Like I said, it's similar as academic achievement as to why. When students are able to manage their emotions and understand their impact on others and themselves, they're just more aware and they're just able to treat others better. This also reduces destructive behaviors and promotes a positive classroom environment, because when students feel heard and understood, they're more likely to go out of their way to hear and understand others. And that means teachers, classmates, anybody. So that is why we have improved student behaviors. And finally, another benefit is that it benefits everyone. So not only students, but also faculty and staff. So if it is a school-wide program of social emotional learning, which it is quite a bit of the time, so students are working on the CASEL wheel, right, if it is through CASEL, and so are the teachers, because they're teaching it, and they should be the role models and demonstrating these skills as much as they can to really hit home that these skills are important. So if both students and teachers are working on this together, that will positively impact the classroom climate so much, because everyone is moving forward and working on these skills. So those are some of the big benefits that I think are super important. But along with benefits, there are always challenges to things. So the first one I want to discuss is time. So while trying to fit all curriculum into the schedule and creating meaningful lessons, a lot of teachers fear that they simply do not have enough time in the school day to teach social emotional learning. And I understand that because I know as going to be a teacher, hearing from teachers, teachers wear a lot of hats and they have a lot of pressure and they need to be teaching this and that and this. And so it can be hard to try and add new things into the day. However, it is still possible to incorporate social emotional learning into the school day. A lot of teachers just think that maybe they need to find 20 minutes or 30 minutes in a day to specifically teach self-management skills, and you can do that, that's great, but you don't need to do that. You can include it throughout your day in routines, such as a welcoming routine in the morning, or maybe having more class discussions where they can facilitate those social awareness, relationship skills, and also using group work in your activities. So really, you just need to be intentional and really thinking through your lesson and how you can add these organically, not having to maybe explicitly teach it if you don't have time. So the more intentional you are, the more seamless it is, especially in those busy seasons and in those busy days. So that is time. The other challenge is teacher buy-in. And when I say teacher buy-in, I mean that not all teachers yet are on board with this idea of social emotional learning. And that is simply because new strategies take time with anything to be fully accepted. Veteran teachers may argue that they already know what works for them, they've been doing it for years in their classroom, and that is totally, I commend teachers who know what works for them, but I would challenge those teachers to look into the benefits of social emotional learning because there are so many. The proven test scores, the proven behaviors that are just more positive and less challenging. It is just really something to look into, especially if you're just hesitant about it. I would definitely just look into it. And also, I want you to remember when I had you think of that teacher in your head, and then like raise your hand if they had those traits, right? Those teachers were also exhibiting social emotional skills. So although social emotional learning seems like this brand new tool, it's got a fancy name, it's in the limelight, it seems like this new scary thing, it has actually been around and taught for years when past teachers simply built relationships with their students and cared about the well-being of others. Right now, it just has more research out there, it is just a lot more public, where back then it was just how to teach people to be good people, right? Because that is essentially what social emotional learning is teachers caring about their students and teaching them to care about themselves and others. So really, it's not new and scary, it's just something that we know more about now. And finally, the final thing I would like to add to the teacher buy-in is, so we need to realize that along with everything in life, our students are always changing. So what may have worked in the past 5 to 10 years, or maybe even just 2 years ago, might not be the most effective strategy for students today. Just like our world is constantly changing, so are our students and their needs. And especially with technology taking over, students need help developing these social skills more than ever. Because nowadays you just see them in front of a screen and they don't get a chance to develop, especially those social skills, relationship skills. So it's super important to be looking into. So those are 2 challenges and how I challenge the challenges, how maybe we can look beyond those because there are ways around them or to solve them. So next we're going to discuss ways that we can use social emotional learning in our classrooms. Now you know about it, how can we really add it to our classroom? So first, we can pay attention as teachers to our physical layout. We want to make sure that we are being intentional when we map out our classroom to make sure that students are as comfortable as possible, it's a positive place to be, and that they're just in the best spots for them to learn. We also want to avoid sensory overload, and when I say that, I mean like harsh lighting, distracting walls, things like that, because with social emotional learning, we also, once again, are caring about their well-being and making sure that they are ready to fully learn. A solution to harsh lighting, I've seen, instead of like fluorescence, you can have window lighting if that's an opportunity for you, or like lamp lighting to make it just a very calm environment. And yeah, just reducing stuff on the walls if you can. Also being aware of temperature and smell. We want both of those to be neutral if possible. But for smell, I have seen that you can infuse maybe lavender as a soft scent that could keep students on task. Just something to be aware of. And another way to explicitly teach students these skills is to have them maybe have their desks in groups of like 4 or table groups, or having them work in groups as much as you can, because that will organically help them develop those skills with others. So that is physical layouts. The next strategy I'd like to discuss are color zones. So this is the tool of color zones that I'm showing you right now. It is essentially a tool to help students identify how they feel. Because the sooner they're able to identify their emotions, the sooner they're able to regulate and just calm down or realize what's going on. So when introducing this, it is important to let students know that it is totally normal and okay to feel all of these emotions that are listed here. It is really how we manage those emotions and how we react that can have an impact. So we just need to be aware of that. But just to explain these to you really quick, so we've got the blue is when they are typically tired, bored, sad. You can do things like it has a little eye can area, like drink water, take a brain break, get them up and moving, things like that. The green is where we want our students to be, ideally. It's the happy, calm, and focused. Just keep up the good work there. Yellow is kind of the opposite of blue. They're not really focused, but it's because they're excited or frustrated or just antsy. And so there are certain ways that we can also calm them down and get them refocused. And red is where we would like to avoid if we can. That is the out of control, angry, or just really overwhelmed. But it's just important for us to have a plan in place for what to do when that's the case, like a safe corner or taking a break, things like that. So I have seen this actually in a practicum where students every morning, they would just point to how they felt. And it can be definitely used throughout the day as emotions fluctuate throughout the day. So I think that's another great strategy. The final one that I want to discuss with you are morning meetings. So morning meetings are what they sound like essentially. It is a meeting that you have with your class that is typically in the morning, and if it is in the morning, it starts the day off on the right foot. It can be a really safe place for students to review expectations as a class. Maybe if they are blurting out loud a lot, you can talk about it as a group before school starts, you know what I mean? Things like that. It's also a great time to build relationships with students and just ask them what they did that weekend. And it really helps to build that classroom community. And you can also, of course, build those social emotional skills. You can teach it explicitly, talk about what does it mean to make a good decision, or you can just have, like I said, building those social skills as other students talk as well. So I think this is another great strategy. There are so many strategies, but those are just the ones that stand out to me. And fortunately, there are also an abundance of resources and curriculum that I will touch really quick for you. These are 2 has 2 on it. These are 4 that I found online that I think are great resources. The first one is Stanford Harmony, and these are free, so that's awesome. But it is designed for pre-kindergarten through 6th grade, and it really focuses on building relationships, and it believes that the better relationships you have in a classroom, the less conflict and behavioral issues you will encounter, and that is so true. I really like how Stanford Harmony has 2 everyday practices that they discuss. And the first one is Meetup, which is essentially morning meetings, and it gives you curriculum and ideas for that. And the other one is Buddy Up, so that means that you meet with, you get a new partner, essentially, every week as a student, and that allows you to really learn your classmates, understand maybe diverse perspectives, really learn from each other in that way. So I really like Stanford Harmony. There's a lot of great resources along with that one. 2, I have the Ruler Approach and the PATHS program listed together because they are actually considered CASEL Select programs. So that is just a fancy term for meaning that these are programs that are proven, that they work, and they allow students to master those skills and show mastery a little bit better maybe than the other ones. The Ruler Approach is more so paying attention to the self aspect of being aware of your emotions and how you're acting, things like that. And the PATHS program is actually more of that social aspect, so understanding different perspectives, working well with others. And 3, I have the Mind Up curriculum. So this one is a program that works to benefit emotional literacy, and it really believes in the power of what it calls mental fitness, and that social emotional learning is so important for all students, and it has a lot of kind of fun games, diagnostics on there that students can look into. So these are just a few resources that stood out to me, but there are so many resources online. and like on paper too, but it really depends what each unique school needs, because every school is different, every classroom is different, so really just doing your research before you really, purchase one or get one. And finally, I would like to discuss how I plan to use social emotional learning in my future. So essentially, I would like to use it as much as possible. I know that it is so beneficial, and I've actually seen, I've seen morning meetings, I've seen the color zones in my classrooms for my practicums, and I've just seen how they work, and they help to make the classroom such a positive community to be in. But something I would like to focus on is the physical layout. I do plan to group my students, maybe like table pods, like groups of 4, to really help with those relationship building skills, the social awareness aspect. I also want to have a cozy classroom environment where all students feel safe and comfortable to learn and relax. I also would like to be conducting morning meetings as much as I can. So I want to teach like lower elementary, so I feel like these will be so appropriate and helpful to students. It's a great opportunity to start the day fresh and learn social emotional skills. And finally, so I will be the new teacher at wherever I end up for teaching, right? But I will also have so much to offer because I want to teach other teachers about social emotional learning and maybe help with some misconceptions or help them implement whatever social emotional thing they're thinking about, or even just guide them in the right direction. I think that is so beneficial. So yeah, I want to advocate for social emotional learning and help other teachers to learn more about it. So today I covered social emotional learning and what it is, its history. I discussed some of its benefits along with some of its challenges. I gave you some examples of how you can add this into your classroom along with different curriculum programs and how I plan to use this in the future. Social emotional learning is here to stay, and that is great news. Because of this, our future generations can capitalize off of this idea of the whole child approach, and it is our job as teachers, however, to spread the word and give our students what they truly need to thrive in the classroom and beyond. So thank you for listening. Does anyone have any questions?
One question for you. I'm really interested. This was fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome job. Awesome job. I expected nothing less. So the current, in the last 5 years, the Nebraska State Board of Education has removed any mention of SEL in our English language arts and math standards. So I think the trend in Nebraska right now is leaning towards not being able to mention SEL. So I was fascinated with the fact that you said you're seeing this in your practicum. So when you see it in the classrooms that you've been in, are they explicitly saying SEL, or do you just know so much about SEL that you're just seeing it, you know?
I think I am just seeing it, and that's okay. Like that is how my teachers, your guys' teachers did that. Like it's just kind of in the classroom, just having a positive environment. My teachers, they had those nice layouts in the classroom that made everyone feel comfortable. I've seen morning meetings, and that's just great for all students and their social skills. And the color zones, they never said it was social emotional learning, but that's what it is.
That makes me happy.
Yes, it is out there.
Yep, awesome. So it's not like the castle wheel is out there. Are you seeing that in classrooms?
I have not. I've seen it in the wing classrooms. I have not seen it out in the field though. Like not displayed.
I'm not against it, but
Yeah.
I just wondered how districts were handling that.
Yeah,
So.
I haven't seen it displayed explicitly anywhere, but I mean, they're using the strategies.
Thank you. I love it. I love it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I would just mirror what Dr. Snyder said. You did a great job.
Thank you.
That, again, we wouldn't expect anything.
Thank you.
It's been a privilege having you here on campus.
Thank you. I love having you too.
Well, let's give her a round of applause. I'm going to present you with these honor cords for graduation.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Well, fantastic job.
Thank
I
you.
really enjoyed working